and welcome back to Health Without the System. I'm Dr. Tim Scott.
And my name is Mia Scott, guys. Welcome back. And for you first-time listeners, welcome for the first time. We appreciate you joining. Today, we are going to be talking about if your multivitamin could potentially be useless.
Yeah, not all multivitamins supplements are created equal. Sometimes people think just go to the store, pick up a vitamin, and I'm good to go, but that's not the case.
Nope, and we would like to expose the truth on what to look out for, what are some red flags with some of the supplements that you might be taking, the ones that we like and recommend, and how to just really optimize your health if vitamins is something that you take daily.
Yeah, we'll help you build up a good stack and become a pro.
Yep. So number one, we want to talk about absorption. Just throwing out some statistics here. 1 in 3 adults in the United States take a multivitamin, yet nutrient deficiencies and chronic diseases remain high. This goes back to my saying that I'd say every single time when I talk.
Let me say what you're about to say. You can't supplement your way out of good health.
Yep.
Poor health. You can't supplement your way out of poor health.
Yep. You will never supplement your way out of a bad lifestyle, which means that take all the supplements that you want. They're just that. They're supplements. So unless you change some of the other factors like environmental and, of course, what you're doing daily, some of those supplements will not do great service to you. So we're going to kind of talk about that if you do take supplements, what could those look like for you, how to better your cabinet there. So
yeah, a lot of times a company in the business world, you want to make money, right? So you're going to use cheap ingredients, raise your prices. This is a competitive business, so you want to have the lowest cost supplement, and therefore they want the cheapest stuff to make it. Now, not all companies are like that. Some understand that people will pay more to get better, to get what they need in terms of what they want for health, vitamins, et cetera. So you mentioned absorption. That's one thing we're going to talk about, but vitamins and supplements can be synthetic forms, inactive forms, not the right salts, et cetera, so you can't absorb them better. So let's go through a little bit real quick and talk about absorption. First off, where does most of this absorption occur?
Well, these typically happen in the small intestine, specifically the duodenum and the jejunum. I hate saying that word, but nonetheless. And then, of course, your fat-soluble vitamins, those are that require the bile and fat to absorb. So there's many mechanisms of when you take the medication or the supplement on, how your body breaks that down, absorbs in different areas of your body. So that leads us directly to a point where if those aren't working properly, if you have some gut dysbiosis, which we'll get into, that can also not be absorbed.
Yeah. So you mentioned you have fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K.
Yep.
Your water-soluble vitamins are, all these B-complex vitamins, your vitamin C. Then there's also those chelated minerals, your zinc, your iron, and when they are in the chelated forms like zinc bisglycinate versus zinc oxide, you're going to get that superior absorption.
Same with the liposomal. That's a really highly absorbed as well.
Yeah. Talk about that real quick because people always ask me, well, not always, but I get the question, what is liposomal? I act like people are calling me on the phone every day. Like, what's liposomal mean, Dr. Scott? No, that's not the case. But what's liposomal?
So I'm going to read this definition. So It's where nutrients are encapsulated with a tiny spherical structure called liposomes. And this just allows for better absorption. And we'll go into kind of what we use for the liposomal, but glutathione is another one. You can get liposomal vitamin C. It just, layman's terms, allows for a better absorption for your body.
Yeah, basically a liposomal layer, think of it as a little encapsulation of phospholipids or fats that make it easier for these to get to the place that they need to go in the body. So if you see liposomal, generally that means it's going to be a little bit higher quality and probably better absorption.
Yep. So talking about absorption ranges, this is a statistic that I've learned a long time ago. For those of you who listen in or know us personally, we also have a wellness clinic that does IV therapy for micronutrients as well. So I used to always talk to my patients on how absorption is actually quite low, even with oral supplements. About 10 to 30% of our supplements that we take are absorbed by our body. So that leads to the point, do we even take them? Well, the answer is yes. However, it is still a less bioavailable form, which means that when you do take these supplements, they have to be good sourced, good quality, and actually going to do your body a service, or else it's quite literally expensive pee, which we hear all the time. Why are we just having expensive pee? Not to say that they don't help, but it has to be the right kind. Your body has to be set up to absorb. And then, of course, just very good quality, which we'll get into.
Yeah, and for the most part, vitamins are going to be better absorbed, IV or IM, but who really has time to always go get IV or IM vitamins, and who wants to get poked all the time? So there is a role for that, and if you get critically deficient in certain things, that might be the better route. But if you're talking about a standard, like your routine, your maintenance program, oral is what's going to work for most of us. So that 10 to 30% absorption, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the person, it does help. It does make a difference. It's not 0%. So.
Sure. And I think for the B12, it's like as little as 1 to 2% for patients. A lot of times, so if they have a gut dysbiosis, they lack an intrinsic factor, gastric bypass on PPIs, which we'll get to. Those are things that can lower the absorption of B vitamins, including B12. So just some things to be mindful of when you're supplementing. And then, of course, we will go into what those good supplements are going to look like.
Yeah, continuing along, talking about absorption, let's just talk about like time of day and what you absorb with. So like your fat-soluble vitamins, again, we mentioned A, D, E, and K. You're going to want to take them with a meal that contains fat, right? That's going to help them absorb.
Yep, better absorption for sure. Iron and magnesium, those are typically better absorbed on an empty stomach. Sometimes they can cause GI upset. I know zinc is one with me that I have to take with food that can make you very nauseated. So just be mindful of the time of day and if you have to consume food with it. B complex, it's all your B vitamins. Those are going to be a little bit more of a stimulant. Those are best in the morning. Usually if people don't have a big reaction to coffee, meaning it keeps them up longer or later, they usually do okay with B vitamins. But if you want to get that hit of the morning, basically an extra cup of joe, B vitamins would be best in the morning.
Yeah, and then like an example, calcium and magnesium, those actually compete for absorption. So those are the kind of things you want to separate out, maybe taking your calcium in the morning, your magnesium in the evening if you're on those kind of supplements. And just taking a look, sometimes it's as simple as Googling some of your supplements if you're not sure, and it will give you an idea of how and when those might be better absorbed or what they might compete with.
Yep. And then next, we want to talk about just a few common conditions that can affect the absorption of some of the vitamins that you might be taking or eating in general. So number one, we've already talked about that we could absolutely do an entire podcast on PPIs, which is the proton pump inhibitors.
We probably will.
Yeah, your like omeprazole, your acid reflux reducer medications. And typically these are going to deplete anybody in absorbing B vitamins. As we know, B vitamins are incredibly crucial. They can have gut dysbiosis, allow you to not absorb what you need, specifically all your Bs, B12, calcium, iron, things of that nature that are incredibly important for our cells to function.
Magnesium, that's a very common supplement that people are on, and PPIs can inhibit that.
And we've done this before. I've done a micronutrient testing on Tim. He is a chronic PPI user. We've done some nutrients on him, and before we even knew about supplementing, this was years ago, and it was spot on. He was low in all of these things, all the B vitamins, magnesium. We had to supplement. We retested. We're good levels now, but there's things that you can do to correct that.
I feel so shameful. You know, it's like the first step's admitting it. Yeah, I'm a chronic PPI user. I just can't get off of them. I can't quit.
Those are terrible.
We'll
really
do an episode. I think when we talk about the PPIs, we'll incorporate my story into it because we have done like everything on earth and I just can't get off of them. So we'll figure it out.
Right. But you're also like a 20+ year user. So that's
not good.
No, not at all. But anyway, so anybody who's taking a PPI, those are very common things to suppress your B vitamins. So anybody who is on those types of drugs, highly recommend having a methylated B complex or methylated vitamins. We will go into what that means a little bit later here, but just making sure that it's a very good quality and sourcing and methylated B vitamins. So
metformin is another common medication that a lot of people are on, and that's going to reduce your B12 absorption. So pay attention to that.
Yeah. Statins is a big one. So many are on statins. That depletes your CoQ10, which is a little bit ironic in my book because CoQ10 can actually protect you of cardiovascular issues. And then they put you on statins to help your cardiovascular issues. So
let's not talk about the number needed to treat for statins right now.
Yeah, a little bit of an oxymoron there. But also if you're on a statin, it's very good to supplement some type of CoQ10.
Yeah, a quick plug for CoQ10 anyway. I mean, CoQ10 is great. It's involved in multiple different processes in the body. Like Mia said, a lot of cardioprotective effects, and a lot of us are a little bit low, if not depleted on it, even if you're not on a statin. But especially if you're on a statin, you should be on CoQ10. And here's another place where you can talk about the form where it matters a little bit. Because if you are going to take CoQ10, look for the ubiquinol form instead of the ubiquinone. The ubiquinol has better absorption, and that's just a little...
It's easier for your body to be able to absorb.
Yeah, gut issues are a big one, right?
Yeah,
so like...
Talked about SIBO. SIBO is a very overlooked issue, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This a lot of times gets missed for like an IBS or a gut dysbiosis. We use that word to blanket pretty much any gut dysfunction, but SIBO can absolutely wreak havoc on your B vitamins as well and can destroy them before you even absorb them. And just to throw this out there, this isn't just supplements. We're talking about the actual B12, zinc, magnesium, things that you eat every day.
Yeah.
So
point.
these factors are also going to be depleting that. So this isn't just about these are supplements. If you take them, if you don't take them, it doesn't apply to you. No, these are everything that you eat in a day. And if you have these disease processes, this is even more of a reason why you need to supplement with good methylated vitamins, because if you have these disease processes or take these certain medications, you will be likely deficient in some of these micronutrients.
Yeah, I mean, you're on fire today. You said you were having a bad hair day, but you're having a good brain day. I'll tell you that. Okay.
Who invited him? Okay, so next one is this.
Let's talk about the actual structure now. So if you start to talk about celiac, IBD, Crohn's, right? A lot of people out there have some of these inflammatory disorders or sensitivities or even allergic reactions, and that's going to cause actual damage to the microvilli in your intestines. So think of that brush border along the intestinal wall. This is where actual absorption occurs. And if there's a lot of inflammation, that's going to impair absorption. That's going to actually also lead to damage and long-term effects. But your fat-soluble vitamins, your B12, your iron, your zinc, these are all critical. You need good function at these microvilli.
In the gastric bypass, if anybody who's ever had a gastric bypass, you were likely told to be on some vitamin supplement because of that. Anybody who has had a gastric bypass, highly encouraged to take, once again, methylated forms of B vitamins. I bet your doctor didn't tell you about the methylation part, but it's very important to have this. And just a quick example, which we'll go into this. For example, if you're a B12, it should say methylcobalamin instead of just cyanocobalamin. We'll go into what that means.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
And not just gastric bypass, that's also for people who may have had a bowel resection, like maybe you've had a small bowel obstruction in the past or an issue with your colon. I mean, there's going to be less of this absorption in the colon. But and the last thing that I was going to say about that is some people with gastric bypass actually will not be able to absorb. And if you've been told that, just remember you're probably going to need to do IM or IV forms of these medications.
Yep. So that basically just bypasses that route of absorption. You're not taking it orally. You're taking it either in a shot or an IV. We get a lot of patients at our IV clinic that will do after gastric bypass, come a few times a month and make sure that they're getting a lot of the nutrients that they just simply can't absorb.
Yeah. And then we mentioned the stomach acid before, but another important concept with that is intrinsic factor. So intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein that's produced in the parietal cells of the stomach, and basically you need it to absorb B12. So some people are actually born with low or no intrinsic factor, which can affect that as well. And generally you'll know that. A lot of people know, but some people don't. And it's a thought if you're constantly getting these very, very low B12 levels.
Yeah. And then anything autoimmune. Remember, I think this was just our last podcast or maybe a few ago, talking about how the immune system lives in the gut. So very important that if you have any type of autoimmune issue, gut issues, you are likely not having your gut live to its full potential to absorb and be able to use all of those nutrients.
Yep. All right, let's move on and talk about some really common supplements and what you should be looking for basically with them. The first one is going to be folic acid versus methylfolate.
Yep. And we go into this saying the difference is a synthetic form, which is basically an inactive form, and then the methylated form. So I can say this right now, if you're getting your supplements from the same place that you buy your toilet paper from, it's not methylated vitamins. So if you go to Walmart or Kroger and you're getting a basic vitamin, it is not methylated. They are very cheap and they're very cheaply made. And of course, the sourcing will show. So number one, folic acid versus methylfolate or 5-MTHF. Now, why does this matter? Okay, so folic acid is the synthetic form of the vitamin B9. And if it is not methylated, our bodies can have a hard time doing the conversion to get it methylated. So perfect example in this is actually actually, let me go into the MTHFR gene mutation with this because this will tie into my next thought here. Up to 60% of the population has what's called the MTHFR gene mutation. And this is basically a snip in the gene, meaning that you cannot do this conversion that is needed to appropriately or properly turn on this methylated form. So the problem is that when patients are taking a synthetic form of something like a folic acid, it can actually kind of confuse the receptors and bind to these receptors. And when you do eat natural forms, like your leafy greens and vegetables of that sort, your body's like, hey, I'm good. And it kind of just chills at the receptors. And you're not truly absorbing if you do have the methylated forms from the natural version. So in theory, this can actually make things worse. Now, I was the perfect example of this. I found out that I had the MTHFR gene mutation with this folic acid issue because with my OB. And we went into long down the rabbit hole. They tried to prescribe me this folic acid that was synthetic. And I had a dietitian. I did testing for the MTHFR gene mutation. And I found out that I was positive. I had 2 SNPs. And guys, this is very common. Majority of the population have this. But this is the problem with the absorption. When I found out that I had this gene mutation, I was actually 6 months postpartum. I was still breastfeeding and I was still taking my multivitamin recommended by my OB. And when I had my nutritionist consult, I said, my folic levels are in the red. How is this possible? I've been on this prenatal for a year now. And she told me, this is years ago, she told me, walk to my pantry, read the back of it, and it was the folic acid. It was a synthetic form. She said, throw it away. You have this gene mutation. You're consuming the wrong form. You will only make your levels worse. I then switched to the methylated form, and within 3 months, I did a repeat, and I was on all the other way of the spectrum, which ties me back into that this is a huge issue in anybody who is having chronic miscarriages or anxiety issues. Like this, it goes so hand in hand, and we'll get to the books that you can read about this. But nonetheless, this is a perfect example of how crucial a methylated vitamin could be day and night difference with your journey.
Yeah, statistically, up to 40 to 60% of the population has some form of the MTHFR mutation. And I think it's important to understand, we're not going to dive into this mutation so much on this podcast, but it's important to understand this is not an all or none necessarily. It's not like a pregnancy test, you're either positive or negative. It's a spectrum. And so when you have MTHFR mutation, it's going to affect some percentage of your ability to methylate. Sure. So it's not just 100%.
And of course, and of course, lifestyle and things of that nature will kind of dictate turning this on and off. But
that's epigenetics.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
But nonetheless, it's very important. And this is what I mean by not a lot of people or providers know, because this is a completely different world of sourcing and supplements. So this is just my take-home point for you guys. For anybody who is pregnant or breastfeeding that do not take the synthetic forms of folic acid, please find a supplement that says the methylfolate or the metrotetrahydrofolic acid. I know it's a super long word. If it just says folic acid, it's synthetic. So big take-home point there.
Yeah, and last point to that too, you don't necessarily have to run out and test yourself to see if you have this mutation. I mean, you can just kind of take the methyl form.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that when you said 40 to 60% of the population. That is what is tested. So imagine, because nobody just it's not a yearly test that patients do, or it's a special test that you'd have to ask for, and a lot of times insurance
and usually it's a few $100.
Yeah,
I mean, anywhere from $200 to $600.
Yeah, I mean we can do it much cheaper, but if you were to go without insurance, it is very expensive. If you went to your PCP and asked for this, but my point is that it shows that about 60% of patients have this that are tested. So imagine how many people are walking around with this, but not a death sentence. But this leads into the fact on how knowing that everything should be methylated allows your body to absorb things better, which leads us to our number 2, which would be the cyanocobalamin versus methylcobalamin.
Yep. So that's your B12, right?
Yes.
And your cyanocobalamin is the synthetic form of B12, and it's bound to cyanide.
Yeah,
in tiny
it's
amounts. So
tiny amounts.
That's exciting.
But it's actually cyanide. So this is a perfect example, and this is your go-to on how you know if a supplement's good. Very easy way. Scroll down to your B12, look at it. If it says cyanocobalamin, put it back. It's a synthetic form. That entire company out the window. You have to make sure it says the methylcobalamin or even the hydroxycobalamin.
Yeah, and I like to talk about this one too, because conversion into your methylcobalamin actually happens in the liver. So in the liver, you get methylcobalamin. That's for brain, mood, nerves, or then you can also get adenosylcobalamin, which is what's going to help your mitochondria. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of ties together how we talk about, having that good liver function, being detoxed, not overburdening your liver. Let's imagine you have a high toxic load. You're not getting good clearance. Now all of a sudden you're affecting not just metabolism, but methylation. And now that's going to affect your brain, your mood, your nerves, et cetera. And if you have an MTHFR mutation, something like that can make it worse. So it just is a way to kind of understand how this all links together.
Yeah. And just to throw that on there, because we won't talk about epigenetics here, but just because you don't have this mutation doesn't mean that you can still have your body act like it has this mutation. That is called a dirty gene, and your environment can control that. But it's important for everybody. If you were paying money to take supplements, make it count. Make it be the good stuff.
Yep, I like it. So you're looking for methylcobalamin, adenosylcobalamin, or hydroxycobalamin.
Yep. Stay away from cyanocobalamin.
Correct.
And next up is magnesium. If we are talking about oxide or the chelated magnesium, Magnesium oxide is actually only about 4% bioavailable for your body. Really, the only people that I feel like this could probably benefit would be your endurance runners, because it does help that vasodilate. It can help people breathe a little bit better, but there are definitely better forms for magnesium.
Or people who are constipated, Magox.
Yeah,
if
the
you're
citrate
actually
still
taking,
is, yeah,
I agree.
citrate
I
I
like
still go.
citrate too, but
Yeah.
Magox can help.
It can. Yep.
Yeah.
Any magnesium can
It
help
just
bowel
goes. It
movement.
really just goes right through your gut.
Yeah.
I mean, makes the poo come out
For sure. Chelated forms, those are bound to amino acids, so they have better absorption and less of a GI upset. Typically, we take like a magnesium glycinate. That's what we take at home. You can even get really fancy and do like the magnesium threonate, and that is for your brain health. So different forms of magnesium can help different parts of your body. But nonetheless, magnesium is one of the micronutrients that is very, very depleted in our area, and it's very common to be low on that one.
I need to just take a quick pause and ask an important question here. So this was a long time ago that this happened, and I can't remember, but when we mentioned the magnesium going right through your stool and coming out as poo, you know, if you're driving in your car and like somebody texts you and your Siri or whatever reads you the text, what does it say for the poop emoji?
I don't know.
Does it just say like poop emoji, or is there like a special?
Well, we got to find that out. We have to ask you.
I just thought of that. I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. We can move on.
We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, like when it's reading aloud to you, what does it say?
I don't have my text read to me.
Yeah, we should do that. Okay, sorry. Let's move on.
So look for magnesium glycinate, malinate, or like I said, the threonate if you want some more neuro health for the magnesium.
And the threonate is probably the best form, but it is a little bit more expensive.
It can be
expensive. I think you can get pretty good results from the glycinate. The next one is vitamin E, and you have to kind of determine this DL alpha tocopherol versus the mixed tocopherols. The DL alpha is going to be your synthetic form of vitamin E, and that can actually suppress your absorption of real vitamin E. So that's an important one to make sure you're looking at reading the label and checking. Your natural vitamin E is actually a family of different compounds: alpha, beta, delta, Gamma. Yeah. I couldn't remember if there was another one or not. And then, of course, the synthetic version can also screw up the antioxidant effects. So
So look at like the gamma and delta if you do take the vitamin E. That one's a little bit more specific. I personally, I'm not on one of those, but if you are, once again, make sure sourcing.
And there's actually a little controversy. You know, some patients it's not the best for. We're not going to get into vitamin E today, but yeah, agreed. That one's probably not.
We're just going to go up the most common that we see our patients on.
Yeah.
The next one is vitamin A, the beta carotene, and versus the retinol. I can never say this. Palmitate.
Yep. Retinol.
Of course, once again, active is the active vitamin A. That's what you're going to be looking at. That is not the synthetic form. That's of course for your vision, your skin, immune health. This is what gives us the color too. Eating too many carrots type thing. So great for the skin.
Yeah, and vitamin A is also really important for thyroid conversion and good function. So that's one of those in that category: selenium, zinc, vitamin D, vitamin A. It's kind of a forgotten vitamin at times, but if you are getting it supplemented or you're checking, make sure you're in the right form here too.
Yep. And our last supplement that we find very common here is the calcium carbonate versus calcium citrate. We have a lot of patients, if they've ever had like osteoporosis, osteopenia, they are on the calcium carbonate, and that is actually like the cheapest and the most poorly absorbed, especially given stomach acid as well. But this can actually raise risk for cardiovascular because the calcium can actually deposit in your vasculature, which is a problem.
Yeah.
So it has a problem getting into the cells.
That's why we like the K2. If you have vitamin D with K2, the K2 is going to be helping with that calcium as well.
And keeping that out of the cells.
You want to get that
or into the cells.
In the cells. Yeah, you want to keep it out of the bloodstream. You want to get it into the bones. K2 can help with that. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you get your calcium citrate form, avoiding the calcium carbonate.
Or even better, the calcium hydroxyapatite. That's another good one. And then, like we said, the vitamin K2 paired with K3. If anybody is taking vitamin D3, it's probably best to have that paired with K2. Of course, given medical history, consult with your doctor, but sometimes people say if blood thinners, you should avoid that one, even though it's a different form of K2. But nonetheless, it's definitely good to pair with that. Better absorption for the body, pushing the nutrients where it needs to be into the cells, out of the vasculature.
Yeah. So quick wrap up, you might not know everything about your genome. You might not know everything about your gut. You might not understand that you have some things brewing based on your environment, your lifestyle that are going to affect you in your 40s and 50s, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s. You may have methylation issues. You may have gut dysfunction. You may have some autoimmune conditions that are developing. If you listen to us long enough and follow a lot of the things we talk about, you can stop that stuff dead in its tracks. Chronic disease is preventable. Lifestyle is the way you do it. That's why this matters. Eating right, the whole nutrient dense, clean foods. We talk about this all the time. all of this ties together. That's why this is so cool. I mean, all of this ties together.
Yeah. And you really will feel an effect on things once you have a premium supplement regimen and then, of course, lifestyle. But once again, you cannot be eating McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner multiple times a week and taking a multivitamin and expecting everything to just cancel out each other. It's just not going to happen like that. You're not going to feel your best if you're still having a toxic lifestyle.
Yep. Okay. So quick, the multivitamin label, so we're at the store, we're looking at a vitamin. Maybe it's a daily multivitamin. What do I want to avoid here?
First thing that's the easiest right away is the B12. If it says methylcobalamin, you're usually in good hands. If it says cyanocobalamin, put it back. Folic acid, put that back instead of methylfolate. You want the methylfolate of the hydrotetrafolate. Oh my gosh.
Can you say that 3 times fast?
No, I can't, which is why I try to say it slow. Magnesium oxide, stay away from that one. Look for the other forms like we said, the thionate and glycinate is still a good one if you'd like to go that route. Of course, this is a no-brainer, and it blows my mind that there's dyes in multivitamins. I was talking to Tim's grandma the other day, and she is taking a multivitamin, and she's like, "Hey, can you go over my supplements with me?" I'm like, "Sure." Flip her over. She gets a multivitamin from Costco. I flip it over, and there was Red 40 in it and a bunch of other dyes, and I'm I'm not even finishing this list. It went right in the trash.
Done.
So any dyes, throw it right away. Absolutely not. The other things to look out for, it shouldn't say the titanium dioxide, PEG, shellac, talc.
Yeah,
These
just
are
look
all
at a bunch of
additives.
things that you're like, I mean, shellac, it's like, didn't I spray that on puzzles? Things, that just doesn't make sense. Talc, you've had to have heard the lawsuit commercials about that, right?
Yeah.
So you just know that can't be good. We did mention if you're looking at a vitamin E, try to stay away from the DL alpha tocopherol. You want mixed tocopherols. And your little pet peeve is the proprietary blends, right?
Yeah, if it's a very trusted company, meaning that you've gotten a lot of supplements from them before with the other blends that you've liked, you know that they're good quality sourcing, it's okay. But if it's a Joe Schmo brand, you know nothing about it, and it says proprietary blend, this could be a gray area because it's essentially saying that we aren't disclosing how many amounts of this blend that we're putting in. So you could get very little of one and almost nothing of the other, and a bunch of something that's the cheapest. So just be mindful of that blend, especially if it's a very expensive supplement. You really don't know what you're getting. And then, of course, we could do an episode on third-party testing, but purity is mattering as well. If you want to look for sometimes they'll be stamped or say the NSF, the USP, and the CGMP. Those are one of the biggest for the third-party testing that you can know that it's a green check mark. You're probably good with that one.
Yep. I also like if it says, no artificial fillers, binders, letting you know that. You can look for those. Sometimes they're not going to have that on there, but looking for the third-party testing, no artificial fillers, binders, and then the other things we mentioned will help you get a quality vitamin. I know nobody pays us, but what's a brand that we like, specifically?
Codage is amazing.
Yeah.
I really like them. We take their fermented multivitamin. We recommend that for a lot of our patients. We do a liposomal glutathione, liposomal vitamin C, magnesium. We get a lot from them.
Yeah, they have digestive enzymes and some good gut stuff too.
Yeah, they're an amazing brand. I mean, a lot of them. Pure encapsulations, they're a good one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brands that we use for our patients. Thorn,
we use a lot of Thorn too. Those are the top 3 that I would say to start with for what you're looking for.
Yeah, and those are the cheaper ones. I mean, of course, you can get orthomolecular. You can get real high premium supplements, which we do recommend, but sometimes it has to be cost sustainable for patients too.
Yeah, we're not rich.
Yeah, correct. And then I just want to say for sure that if you guys don't want to waste money, and I say waste money on supplements because some people don't or do want to test, you can test. I've gotten many micronutrient testings over the last 6 years. At one point, I think I did 3 a year just to make sure that I was using my money right and fixing these depletions. So there has not been one test that I've done with a micronutrient panel with my patients that has been fine. And I'm talking 15, 20, 30 depletions. So it's very common to have these depletions, and it's almost like a butterfly effect. Your body works on so many of these micronutrients to have status quo in your body. And when you have one abnormality, it kind of snowballs into so many different processes that we're relying on that. So testing is appropriate for anybody who wants to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, and I think we're also used to traditional Western medicine where your doctor hands you a prescription and there's never the discussion of coming off of that. Like they write you a blood pressure medicine. They might say, okay, lose a little weight. We can come off it. But a statin or different meds, it's always like, okay, I guess I'm on this for life, right? And I don't like people to have that same feeling with a supplement. A lot of times you're going to supplement short term. If your vitamin D is low, get your vitamin D up. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the middle of winter. And then in the summer, you can come off of it for a while. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you need to be on 10 supplements to get things right, you're taking 10 supplements for the rest of your life every day. And I personally, I am a very good example of that. Like every 3 to 4 months, I'm kind of mixing up. There's some basics. Like I always take vitamin D because I think I ran pretty low in that. And I always take CoQ10, but some of the other things we miss.
Like the amino blend when you're training for your half marathons or your marathons, we would add the amino blend with some extra amino acids, but these are all cycling. We go through these cycling processes, and we also go through cycling based on our depletions, time of year. Like he said, our meals, are we eating differently than we do in the summer than the winter? And we can supplement out on based on our needs and our food that we consume. So it's not an end all be all for, you're going to be on this for life, which is a good point.
So pretty much the takeaways here, a lot of your standard, drugstore or big chain vitamins are probably junk. And not saying you have to run and throw them out, but maybe when you complete those and you're ready to start, you can level up a little bit. Read the label, avoid the synthetics, your low absorption forms, proprietary blends if it's not a trusted company. Look for methylated. That's the easiest place to start. Chelated, clean products, things that say no artificial dyes, no binders, fillers. And then consider testing your micronutrients at the beginning and follow up. And you can also go on how you feel. If you feel poor at the beginning, you get a micronutrient test, and all of a sudden, you take a few supplements for a few months and you're feeling good. You probably repleted that if you don't have the money to retest.
Sure. And if you don't know where to test, we can do that here at Rixa Health. If you go to our website, therixahealth.com, you can book an appointment with one of our providers. We do lab testing, and we can kind of go over what a plan might look like for you. Tim and I are very versed in supplements. We can go over your supplement regimen, and we can do testing on this to see what else you might need or what you might back off on and save some money. So
yes, I think that's about all I have for today. And
Yep.
Okay. So thank you very much for joining in. Please send us any messages if you have any questions. And if you know anyone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. Also like and follow. It really does help us spread the word.
Yep, you got it. Legal mumbo jumbo. Just a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional care, diagnosis, and or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your own health routine. Remember that you have the power. Join us in next time to get more knowledge. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.